Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Transformation podcasts. So today's question is this. We're surrounded by more data, better AI, and smarter tools than we have ever been before. So why are organizations still making such poor decisions? And today's guest lives at the edge of this question. I'm delighted to welcome Russell Evans, who leads the global consumer practice at ZS Consulting. Russell, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Such a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show, Russell. So, Russell, you're also the product owner for Atlas Intelligence, which is ZS's AI-powered consumer insights platform. And therefore, you're working with some of the world's largest CPG and retail organizations as they try to transform how decisions actually get made. And I know that you're also working on data-driven decisions with them, particularly in the CPG and retail markets. So, can I start with what for me is the uncomfortable truth of even with perfect data, humans don't decide rationally. Why do you think that decision making is still one of the biggest failure points in transformation? And do you think it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Uh, I think there's been a lot of extremely smart people, smarter than me, certainly, behavioral scientists,
Mm,
cognitive scientists who have written ad nauseum about why and how humans make decisions. And so I won't pretend to be an expert in that realm, but the way that I make sense of it, and probably would vastly oversimplify, is that humans are just terrible at making decisions. Um,
okay.
we need data and
Mm,
input and stimuli to make decisions, but beyond a very limited point, our brains effectively shut down. We can't process beyond a certain
mm,
point. And
mm,
so there's all these background processes that we've developed over, generations and generations to try to accommodate that are all flawed and biased. And then we've got all these emotional needs, you don't want to look foolish, you need to fit in, you want to
mm,
conform, that are also clouding things. And so all that together just makes us pretty bad at making decisions.
mm.
As anyone who has tried to order dinner with me at a restaurant can
It's
attest, it takes 25 minutes. And so, if that's true of individuals, and organizations are just collections of individuals trying to
of
make
course.
decisions.
Mm,
It just amplifies that problem. And there's all these processes that have been put in place to try to help make
mm,
decisions,
mm,
but they're all sort of, flawed. And now we've poured data in just massive volumes into that equation, and the whole thing is sort of broken.
mm,
So in
mm,
my world, this is on display, I think, quite prominently in the new product innovation process that a lot
mm,
of consumer goods companies use.
mm,
CPG companies exist to bring brands and products into the world, and so that's a pretty important decision they make. Um, and a lot can go, wrong if a
mm,
product doesn't succeed in market, and so because that's a big important decision, it has snowballed into this process of, many people involved, stage gates along the way,
mm,
to go from an idea in someone's brain to a real product on the shelf. Tons of people involved,
mm.
investment committees. And despite all of this, most products don't actually succeed at the end of the day in terms of them, being in the market 2 years, 3 years beyond their launch. And so
Mm.
it's just this massively dysfunctional process that is hugely expensive, very inefficient, and at the end of the day, doesn't even really work that well.
Okay, but
And so I think it's a good microcosm of that problem.
yeah, I mean, and I'm hearing it gets from idea to proof of concept and proof of concept to some type of pilot product, but it doesn't necessarily scale from there on. So
Yeah,
we're
and it's not because there's a shortage of data or smart people. Like they're all
okay.
very smart, passionate people. It's these processes that we've put in place to try to make
Mm,
decisions are now just overwhelmed and broken and don't really function in today's environment, I
mm,
believe.
And tell me a little bit more then about those processes, because like you say, I mean, data-driven is one of those words, isn't it, where everyone has their own definition. Um,
Sure.
but we've poured data in there, we've poured predictive solutions and powerful tools in there. So why is this process still broken? Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of your experience, but also in terms of trends with the people you're working with?
Yeah. Without boring you and anyone listening with the details of the process itself, I'll oversimplify a little bit, but
Mm,
most commonly it starts with uh, consumer insight, learning about who humans are and what they want and which needs are being met and by
Mm,
what and so forth. And this is a very competitive process for a lot of CPG companies, and so an edge historically has been, well, if we just knew one deeper thing about humans and just found that insight that
mm,
no one else has stumbled into. And so there's been this kind of arms race in more and more and more data on
mm,
the front end of the process. But then a manual translation of that insight mountain you're sitting on into ideas. Okay, well, consumers need this, and they're not having that need met. What thing do we make to solve that need? And so, again, we're filtering through dysfunctional human brains of like, well,
mm,
I'm sitting on this mountain, but like now I'm just going to choose two insights from that to like invent a new thing. And so we've kind of thrown out all of that mountain of insight that we
mm,
had, and chose, two things. And then there's the process that kicks in to brainstorm, and it's a bunch of humans sitting around a table with sticky notes and, trying to come up with new ideas. And a lot of new ideas, good ideas do emerge from that process.
mm,
But, then you've got, okay, here's an idea. Well, now we need to test it. And it kicks off this cycle of further testing and refinement. And by the time you get to a thing in the market, the original insight and sort of aha that you might have found is so diluted that's why a lot of these products ultimately are not terribly successful.
mm,
Uh, and and so you've got this, loss of fidelity in the data. You've also got this pervasive, weird incentive system where I don't know if regression to the mean is quite the right metaphor, but like there's the incentives for being wrong outweigh the incentives for being right in many
mm,
cases, and so
mm.
you have kind of smaller thinking. There's a lot of fear of, well, if we get this wrong, then what's going to happen? Are we going to be fired? Are we going to lose the company a
Are we
bunch
going to
of
fail?
money?
Oh my God.
Yeah, and no one wants to be seen as the failure of,
Mm,
obviously. And so you get smaller ideas, you get longer timelines, you get kind of watered down thinking.
mm,
And it's not because anyone, again, one of those people wouldn't want to do it differently. It's just the system sort of conforms everyone and constrains everyone to
mm.
these kind of, that's why you see a lot of new products in market. Well, this year we're launching that same product and now it's got a new flavor, or there's a new color. And
Mm,
those aren't bad things necessarily, but for that to be the output of this, 12-month long process
mm,
with dozens and dozens and dozens of people involved,
mm.
I'm sure that's not what most people in that process would ultimately, want, but that's kind of what the system creates.
And what has AI brought to that process, Russell? Because if I rationalize it, AI is going to speed up that process of bringing data, bringing insights, even suggesting solutions that
Mhm.
may or may not be correct. So what has AI brought to that process, and is it making it any more efficient?
Well, yes and no. I think in some ways AI has actually exacerbated that problem because now we can get access to so much more data, and
Mm,
so it's actually gumming up the works when improperly deployed.
mm,
So we started 5 or 6 years ago at this point experimenting, even pre sort of generative AI, which
mm-hmm,
is now all the rage, trying to deploy AI more in this process, seeing its potential to help sort of synthesize data
mm,
and analyze data at scale, and had some learnings along the way that you actually can't just drop more data into this. It's already so dysfunctional that dropping more data in makes it worse. And
okay.
so we've now adapted the way we think about deploying AI to be a balance of humans that are
Mm,
now enabled by AI, but still having humans with deep domain expertise um, involved at every step along the way,
mm,
as a gut check, as a filter, as a sanity check, and also to infuse these sort of intangibles that are hard to sort of model with data and
mm,
analytics
mm,
along the way.
mm,
Um, and we've tried to our own sort of approach anyway, and I think others are doing the same, is not just using AI to pour more data out, but it's really attempting to synthesize and curate. So it can sit on that mountain of insight and now extract the relevant bits in a given context when you give it the right direction,
mm,
so
mm,
that you are actually taking advantage of the mountain without having humans trying to sit there and sift through a million different data points.
Mm,
So
mm,
trying to evolve AI to be more of a curation tool, not a fire hose,
mm.
and making sure that humans with that domain expertise are involved along the way.
And that was your internal process. So what type of disruption was that for you internally? Because what I'm hearing is, a lot of people are rushing to automate things, but ZS intentionally slowed down. I'm hearing parts of the process to keep humans in the loop, if you like. Can you tell us a
Yeah.
bit about that process and how you managed that disruption?
Um, you're using past tense as if we have cracked the code, and I'm not sure
Okay,
that's
that was my
completely accurate.
assumption. Okay.
I think it's an
Mm,
ongoing balance and trying to
mm,
strike that, and the world is evolving and becoming more sophisticated, so we're kind of chasing a moving target too. But
mm,
when we first started doing this type of work, using AI to help come up with new ideas
mm,
and digest that mountain of data. I think we had a bias as the wonky, analytics people who, oh,
mm,
we're very proud of our gadgets and look at all the great thinking that went into this, towards removing humans and automating and speed. And
mm,
we heard very clearly from clients that we were working with, like, but we have value too. Like don't remove us from the, and of course, in hindsight, that seems like a silly
mm,
thing, but
mm,
and so we actually did work with a few clients to bake AI into a process to enable the humans. Let's remove pieces that don't need to exist, but we're not removing the humans. And we've refined that over the years to try to get that right. But we still have conversations where, there's a lot of hype and tools that have entered the market in this space. And so, a new client who has not worked with us and sort of
mm,
gone through our approach very commonly says, gosh, you guys are a lot more expensive than this thing I can subscribe to and just use myself.
mm,
However, my experience has been that the tools that are cheap and that you can just kind of go out and remove the humans from the process are not really giving you a lot of good answers. And so, yes, you can do that, but are you going to end up in a different spot? I would argue no. And we've
mm,
done a lot of sort of research on research to demonstrate the value of AI plus human typically outperforms either humans or AI in
mm,
isolation.
mm.
And so, but I think a lot of organizations need to sort of experience that for themselves before they kind of come around to that.
Yeah, and I think it's quite a big question, isn't it? How do you partner with AI as opposed to
Yeah.
use it just for automating things? So, and you said, human and AI, sorry. What does it actually look like in practice then? Inside real client work. Where is the human still needed?
Yeah. We have found the biggest advantage in, I'll say AI, but it's a mixture of sort of generative AI and classical
Mm,
AI.
mm,
So we kind of blended the two, but again, I won't
mm,
bore you with my geeky details there. But uh, in a few steps. So the ability to, for example, make sense out of unstructured data.
mm,
By unstructured data in this context, I mean things like product reviews,
mm,
or social media kind of commentary, but not so much the small form kind of tweets, more long form,
mm,
forums where people are talking about who they are and what they want and why this thing I bought either worked or didn't work. Huge insight value in these types of sources, but to read those manually at scale would not be possible. But
mm,
generative AI in particular is really good at turning that sort of information into very structured, useful information.
of course.
And so we have now included an intermediate step there. We
Mm,
don't just say, "Hey AI, go ingest all this data and make new products for us." There's a lot of now intermediate steps where we say, turn that data into this data that is now structured in ways that a business can understand. Here's all the needs in this
mm,
category. Here's all the
mm,
product features and attributes. Here's the sort of buying moments and context that consumers are going through.
mm,
And so that's a stage gate, if you will, I guess,
mm,
but like humans who work in the space can understand, oh yeah, all the needs, I want to know that.
mm,
And now they can look at those and make sense of it and say, this one doesn't make sense, or these do. I never thought about that one. That's really intriguing. Let's dig in. And so we've tried to bake in AI to get us to a point where humans need to make a decision based on their domain expertise. And that's, early on in the process to get the data. But now when you can start to take that data and turn it into new products,
mm,
um, it's not just a, New
Mm,
product,
mm,
it's a paper trail from the data to the product. Why did we choose this ingredient? Why did we choose this image on the pack? Well, here's all the data that led us there.
mm,
That's not to say you have to go and read all of that
of
necessarily,
course not.
but it's there, and there's a
Mm,
paper trail back to the original data. So I'm probably, again, geeking out too much, but baking in those steps where you can sort of see the data, but it's now curated, consolidated in ways that humans in this space can make sense of it and can see, yes, this passes my sniff test or not, and,
mm,
and, and then figure out why.
mm. So the humans are bringing sort of the context and the discernment and the strategic decision essentially. How many times do you see, Russell, technically perfect solutions coming out of that process and being rejected by the organization or the leaders? And why is it always because it's strategically wrong, or are there also other things in the rejection?
Well, I can certainly speak for our own experience. I won't, slander other people's solutions here, but I would say it's more the latter that
Mhm.
I've seen, where there are sort of structural issues that get in the way of
Mm,
adoption of these things. For example, at least as of a few years ago, most consumer goods companies use the standard benchmark for success of a new idea. And again, I'll protect the innocent here.
yeah.
I
Okay.
won't name them, but it was a very common approach. You basically ask consumers, "Hey, if we make this thing, would you buy it?" And then figure out, "Oh, this is a good idea," or not.
Mm,
Um, and it was widely known to be not a great measure. It's pretty easy to manipulate. Consumers aren't always great at saying what they will actually do in the future. Um, but it was the benchmark, and it was there. And so we invented a way to say, well, let's math our way through this. Let's build an AI driven approach that can actually take more real world data and
mm.
predict the actual dollar value of a new idea. If it has this ingredient, it's worth X. If we swap that ingredient for this one, it's worth Y.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Worked really well, very accurate. It was very nifty. We were very proud of it. And a lot of clients, we rushed to tell them, hey, we've got this thing, and you don't need to use that one anymore because this one's so much better.
Mm,
And they universally were just about we're saying, yeah, that is a great thing, but we can't use that because a lot of our incentives are tied up in that other benchmark. And so like I can't not use that
interesting.
benchmark or else I'm not going to get a bonus. I was like, oh yeah. And so, we solved this problem, not realizing the problem was actually this big, and it was like a
Mm,
pervasive structural issue in a lot of these companies. And so it was very eye-opening that
mm.
you can't just drop an amazing gadget into the ecosystem. You have to sort of follow the tentacles of these, processes that have been put in place, not maliciously, they're
No,
good
no, of
intent,
course.
but they don't work anymore in many cases.
Mm.
So it's really structural changes that need to happen in a lot of
Mm.
situations.
It's the systemic part, isn't it, of how it fits into the existing system. How do you see leaders dealing with that, Russell? Because it's one of my favorite conversations. It's also one of my most frequent conversations around not only disruption itself, but how you then disrupt the system so that you can change the collective habit of the system, if you like. Because
Yeah.
brilliant products are, as you said, just brilliant products in inverted commas, unless the person who's buying them can do something with them that will create the sustainable transformation that we're looking for.
Yeah.
So, how do you see leaders reacting to that? And how can we help them understand the systemic element?
I I think when we, started down this path 5, 6 years ago, there was a lot of denial and sort of inertia in the old ways of doing things. Not so much at junior levels, which, if I'm
Mm,
just using broad stereotypes, tended to be, younger people earlier in their careers,
mm.
more exposed to technology in many ways, um, who would then say, "Oh, hey, this is great. Let's do something different," and run into immediate resistance as you kind of got
Of
into.
course.
Um, I'm stereotyping. That's not always true, but more or less. What I think has happened in the case of just AI-driven tools, anyway, is like AI has now become ubiquitous in everyday life in ways that now people I think accept it. And
Mm,
so it's now the awareness is so high that I think yes, there's a lot of hype and stuff that is nonsense. But the actual potential and people being able to use it, even,
mm,
as you get kind of more senior, has shifted the the call from above. Now boards are saying, well, it's not, oh gosh, we got to be careful. We're using AI in the right ways, and like let's set up governance and let's like
mm,
now it's why aren't we using more? Why are we not doing this? I use it every day in my life, so like why are we not using it in the
mm.
company that I, am accountable for? And so that's been the biggest shift, I think, is as more senior people have adopted it themselves and are now sort of demanding that they have the power and authority to change some of these structural
Okay.
systems in ways that maybe didn't exist or that call wasn't there even
Mm,
5 years ago.
mm,
I wouldn't say it's not I've not seen a lot of it's not like every company is doing this perfectly well, but certainly now the ways as reorganizations are happening, it's being thought through. Well, how do we question some of these kind of third rail ways of doing things in ways that would have been heresy a few years
mm,
ago?
mm.
And so I suspect over the next 5, 10 years, a lot of these companies will have pretty substantially revamped the way that they do a lot of this work.
But I think they're going to have to, aren't they? But I mean, over and above the legacy tech systems, here for me, we're talking about legacy human systems in
Mm,
terms of, what we incentivize, what we recognize, how we reward, how we promote, and what is my identity in that organization as a leader at whatever
yeah.
level. But I'm hearing, and that's very hopeful, I'm hearing that there are shifts at a board level and at a C-suite level in terms of increased curiosity and increased questioning as to how it could be different. Which brings me to the discussion around leadership, Russell, which I think is huge in terms of leading in the AI era, because it's going to look very different, or should I say, that's my school of thought. Can you tell me a little
Mm,
bit about what that shift looks like and what it means for the sort of board C-suite level and how they
yeah.
can interact with particularly your process, which is an innovation process?
Well, I don't know if this is quite what you're asking, but I guess the thought in my mind that I'm not really seeing as much of that I would personally prefer is I can't think of a better word than sort of compassion as we go through this sort of
Mm,
evolution. And I think we've seen the companies who are acknowledging they need to do things differently are taking very dramatic, making very dramatic moves. For example, cutting out a big chunk of sort of the middle management of companies to try to make things more efficient. While our more sort of frontline folks can be powered by these tools and they can make a lot of decisions themselves. They don't need all this infrastructure. Let's sort of free that and so let's cut the entire middle chunk of the company out. And I think that's probably a bit of an overreaction. And ignores the value that has been built up over a
hmm
career that many of these individuals have, those intangibles that you can't actually
mm,
just model your way through in many cases. Um, and so what I'm hoping is that that's okay. The early kind of first movers are taking the kind of, hammer instead of the scalpel. But that we'll find a better balance to say, maybe we don't need quite as many people as we used to, but what are the other roles those people can do? What's societally, like we can't
mm,
just remove all these people and say good luck. Like what do all these people going to do? And
mm,
so I haven't yet seen an answer for that. I don't pretend that I necessarily have one
mm,
either, but that's I guess what I would hope is that senior leaders are starting to think through that and how do we not just cut and reduce, but maybe transform and reshape.
Because if I look at what keeps us human, which is going to be even more relevant now that AI does quite a lot of what we used to do in terms of cognitive work and knowledge work, what do you think is the biggest skill that we need to develop as leaders for the next 3, 4, 5 years, where we're going to be constantly up against this wall of fear,
Mm,
personal fear, but also an organizational fear around, are we going to survive? How are we going to use AI? What does it mean? Do we need to lay people off? Do we not need to lay people off? Those type of discussions, which are also societal, but first and foremost, from a leadership perspective. So what do you think is the main skill that we're going to be seeing and that C-suite leaders are going to need?
Oh gosh. It's sort of an impossible question, I think, to probably get right. So
It's
take a
not a
stab.
right or
And
wrong
I don't
answer.
pretend that
It's,
like,
that's
I'm
not.
sitting here with the secret and I won't share it with people. Yeah. Um, in no particular order, I
Mm,
do think a pragmatic approach to understanding the technology itself
mm,
is necessary. And I think we're like swinging back and forth between this like wild enthusiasm and hype and that is front running the actual capabilities of a lot of this technology, but then also like
mm,
the skepticism and throwing. And so I think developing an actual understanding so that you know how to kind of pragmatically deploy it is
mm,
important.
mm,
I've not quite seen that honed in every organization.
mm,
Uh, having a vision for what an organization should be, I think is an important skill, which arguably I would assume a lot of leaders say they have, but I'm not sure that's always true in the sense that I'm creating something new and I have a vision for something that doesn't exist. Vision in many cases is just, well, let's grow.
mm,
And we're going to use sort of the tried and true kind of playbook to get there. And I don't know that that works when you're sort of talking about such dramatic changes in
mm,
how to reorganize your entire company and ways that people interact with each other. And so, rekindling that skill of what is this company? Why do we exist? What is our mission? And how do we achieve that in ways that maybe we've never even thought of
mm,
before?
mm.
That's not a muscle I think a lot of companies have really, exercised.
Well, I
I
think
think
given the
that's probably
time scales, they haven't had to, have they? Because, 5, 10, 20-year strategies. And now, scenario for planning and strategy is on a much shorter time scale, isn't it?
And that's one of the things that this is a very geeky comment to make, but that I'm most excited about the potential
Hmm.
of AI is, we've had that, I think, a regression to the mean, or
Mm,
it's probably a better metaphor, but, the systems that really don't encourage long-term thinking and really sort of force this like
mm,
fear-based short-term, oh, I'm just going to solve for this. But I think if imagine a world where, individuals are armed with I'll say an AI, but again, who knows what form that takes,
mm,
but that actually is an extension of themselves, and knows how you think and operate in different contexts and what information you need to actually make a good decision.
mm,
It's not where we are now. A lot of AI is more or less off the shelf, kind of
mm,
trained for the every person, and it doesn't exactly know how you think and operate. But you can see, even in silly things like shopping assistants now are
mm,
starting to become more personalized.
mm,
And we're a long ways from what I'm describing, but imagine you had something that again knew who you were and how you think and operate and what you need. I think it would be very freeing in terms of feeling confident to make bigger and bolder decisions. I don't need 17 people in a committee to make this decision so that there's diffuse accountability. Like I have all of the information I need to feel
mm,
confident that this is the right decision. Like I think it's very exciting. That would be a very fun place to come and work and make decisions together.
mm, mm,
Versus a lot of what exists now is drudgery. It's meetings, it's conversations, it's alignment.
mm,
And I don't think many people actually enjoy that or think it's the right way to do it.
mm.
So anyway, I'm actually optimistic that technology will at some point in the not too distant future get us to a point where it's actually more enjoyable to come and make these decisions.
Yeah, because we will have more time to do those type of things, or should I say that's the expectation than we do today, because a lot of it will be automated or outsourced to agentic AI or humans. But so if I look ahead 5 years from now, and we come back to the decision-making aspect, because things will be moving a lot faster, I would imagine. What decision-making capability, from your point of view, Russell, will separate organizations that thrive from those that get stuck with, quite expensive tools and not as
Yeah.
much impact as they would like?
Yeah. Well, um, it strikes me. This is a tangent. I'm sorry, but we just shared the movie Aladdin with my daughter, and so we've been talking a lot about what would you do if you had a
Mm,
a genie and three wishes. So I suppose you're giving me sort of a lamp here to cast a wish into the future
I
about what.
am indeed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not. I hadn't previously thought about using one of my wishes in this way, but I guess put me on the spot here. So I mean, so assuming an evolution of the actual technology in a way somewhat similar to what I just described,
Mm,
where it's actually, useful, everyone's got sort of an extension of themselves to help make better decisions. I think the organizations that will succeed with that are ones that effectively change everything about themselves to enable humans to use those types of tools. So if you're still a company that says, well, we can't launch a new product until 18 people have reviewed it. Well, then why did those 18 people, you don't need that technology then. You could have
mm,
just done it the old way. If you're still incentivizing people based on some of these, small thinking, fear-based benchmarks, then you're not really going to push forward. But if instead you are freeing people to make decisions, you're incentivizing them to make bigger, bolder decisions, because you feel confident that they can do that when they're actually given the right information. I think we're going to see bigger ideas, more successful in my context, products being brought to market that better meet consumer needs, that are different from the sort of, small little line extensions and new
mm,
flavors and colors that typically come out.
mm. And and if you were giving a piece of advice to one of our listeners who was sat there thinking, okay, I have this mindset, but above me they don't.
Hmm.
What would your piece of advice be, or your recommendation, Russell, to getting that momentum further up the ladder?
Yeah.
Because I think we have to meet the system where it is. And as we've already discussed, the systems are often stuck in legacy, even if the frontage has innovation in it and they do innovative things. Plugging it back in is often very difficult.
Yeah. Well, I think it looks maybe a little bit different in every organization
Mm,
depending on what matters to them.
mm,
But what I have seen, more or less successful is, money talks. And so if you can carve out a team or a division or some unit and basically experiment to say we're going to do something differently over here,
mm,
um, and prove that we are more successful, we are making more profit, we are producing more widgets, whatever the thing is,
mm,
I feel like that will eventually win the day. In parallel, like I said, I think the sort of rising tide of awareness and usage of some of this technology in people's day-to-day lives will eventually reach that most senior level if it's not already there. And so more receptive to, the tools and the technology. But then at the end of the day, you can't really argue if this team was able to do it, then imagine if all of our teams worked that way.
mm,
So
mm,
that's, I think, the thing I've seen be most successful.
mm. For them to prove it and make it work.
Yeah, do an experiment, and
Mm,
and and depending on whoever's the champion of it,
mm,
that experiment can be bigger or smaller depending on where they are and what sort of influence they have. But it's harder to argue, I think, with real results. We did this thing faster. We
mm,
made more widgets.
mm,
Whatever the
mm.
measure is.
Mm. Thank you. I'm going to leave our listeners with that of be bold enough to try and experiment and then show the system how it could work differently. Russell, I can't finish this podcast without asking you a question about transformation and you and transformation. If you look back over the last 10 years and everything that's happened societally, COVID, the onset of generative AI, etc., what is the most transformative thing you have done in the last 10 years?
Well, I'll speak in a very individual way, which may not be what you're asking, so I apologize if I've missed. But I, up until 5 years ago, was doing a lot of very traditional ways of approaching this type of work. Hey, we're going to go
Hmm.
ask consumers, who are you and what do you need? And, how can we do this better? And sort of, I'm fortunate to work in an organization that encourages people to, sort of live on a slope and sort of
Mm.
take an S curve. And
Yeah.
And so, had the freedom and permission to say, go do it differently then. Go
Mm,
build a thing that does this better.
that's nice. Mm,
And it has not always been perfect. It has been a roller coaster in many ways, but has been very transformative for me and my sort of career
mm,
trajectory.
mm,
And if I'm biased, but I think it has really helped now a lot of organizations in their own transformations as well. And so thankful that I've had that opportunity, but that's
mm,
been sort of the biggest disruptive thing and transformative thing for me, moving from
mm.
kind of traditional consultants to let's go build a product and invent a lot of new things that don't exist.
And I love that idea of the S curve. So if you're stood at the top of the S curve and you're looking over the horizon to the top of the next S curve, what would the transition piece be? So you've transitioned from traditional to what you're doing today in terms of the innovation process and products and just trying, building, measuring, and learning. What's the next transition for to get to the top of the next S curve for you, Russell?
Gosh, and again, very good, but hard questions. I actually think it's a lot of what we've been talking about.
Mm,
We've built a lot of cool gadgets. Other people are building very cool gadgets. It's now time for organizations to figure out which gadgets they want to adopt and how they're actually going to use them and put them into motion. And I do think we're emerging from this period of trial and experimentation
mm,
and pilots, and now it's action time, and we need to actually do things. And so how that happens, and how it happens at scale. A
mm,
lot of these organizations have tens and tens and tens of thousands of people working in
mm.
them, and that's a massive undertaking to try to revamp, build new muscles, and so forth. And so I think that is kind of the S curve we're now sort of we're all on together.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm going to leave our listeners with that then, that they need to go to the gym and get into action and carry on
build
flexing
that new
this
muscle. Yeah,
experimentation
or
muscle
find that genie in the bottle and just
and rub the lamp. Yeah.
in fact, if someone could do that and just fix it all for the rest of us, that would be lovely.
I'm going to leave them with that ideal. I'm also going to leave them with it takes me back to what ZS have done in terms of intentionally slowing down in a
Hmm.
world that's going so incredibly fast. Intentionally
Yes,
slowing down parts of the process, whatever that process is, the transformation process, to keep humans in the loop as well. Okay,
perfect.
super. Thank you, Russell. Where can people find out more about you, about ZS, about what you do?
Uh, well, I would say zs.com, but I suppose ZS
Oh,
for
sorry,
someone.
yes.
No,
British
my American
pronunciation.
shining through there. It's probably the best place to start. Learning kind of about us and some of the approaches we've taken. Feel free to reach out to me. I love geeking out about this, as you can tell. So happy to geek out with anyone who'd want to.
Okay, super. Thank you. I'll put the links in the show notes and thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience and
Such a
your
pleasure.
thoughts.
I appreciate it. Thanks. Great conversation. Thank you. Bye.